So when they asked me to speak today, I thought about what I would share with you. And I think the best story to share is just my real story. You know, not the story that a lot of founders talk about, which is I had a vision and I went after it and then we got here. The story of actually how messy, surprising, and difficult it was along the way. And so when I think about sharing my story, I think about what I wish I would have known when I started a decade ago in startups. And there was really only three big things. The first is that building a business would be exceptionally messy. So I would have to roll up my sleeves and get scrappy, and it didn't matter if we had money from tier 1 Silicon Valley investors or I was 20 and starting a fishery for the first time. That scrappiness was essential in my success. The second thing I wish I would have known is that I had to move from planning, which I was a natural planner, into just pure execution mode, and that even the best business plan in the world wouldn't save me and certainly wouldn't prevent me from failure. And then the final thing, which I think took the longest time to learn, was that all of my innovation would come through iteration. It would come through these little tests that there was no big idea that I had. Ideas and great product market fit is built by trying and having a very disciplined method about how you're experimenting within your companies. So let's start with the first one, being scrappy, because I look at that and it's still quality I have today. And so I started playing founder when I was at Queen's University, and I really say playing founder quite seriously because we had no idea what we were doing. And we played this game called What's the Next $1 Million Idea? And we brainstormed everything from PLA plastic bottles that you could throw to the side of the road and they would biodegrade, into bringing custom-made suits from China before Indochino existed, until we finally settled that we would pursue caviar and fish farming. You're supposed to laugh right now. Because there is no way that this is the most natural thing for 3 21-year-olds to come. We had really good reasons. So worldwide supply of caviar was down by something like 95%. We had just overfished the Caspian Sea. And I remember my first piece of market research was calling Thomas Keller, who's a very famous chef in the United States. And I remember calling him and I said, Thomas, can you tell me why you don't have caviar on your menu? And he goes, do you have any? And in my brain, I'm like, of course I don't have any. I'm a Queen's University student calling you from the library. This is not what I have for you right now. But I knew at that moment that if he was saying he couldn't get the product, if I could figure out how to produce it, I would have a really captive market. So off we went. I mean, we didn't know anything, so we figured the first thing we would do is build a business plan. So I visited all of my North American competitors. That was 8 trips to fish farms. I still remember calling my mother, and she said, are you coming home for Thanksgiving? And I said, no, I'm going to California to see a fish farm. And she goes, oh my, I'm a little worried. And then we didn't know how to raise money, so we started entering business plan competitions. And so I remember doing the first one, we didn't win that one, but we did the second one, and we won that one, and the third one we won, and we finally graduated with about $150,000 and 6 first-place wins. But we were a long way from our goal of $6 million to build a fish farm. So our solution was to get really scrappy. And what I knew is that I had to prove to investors that if I could produce the product, that I could sell it direct to the market and I wouldn't be cut in half by a distributor. And so one of the things that we had figured out in our early days is that there was a wild supply of sturgeon in New Brunswick. And so we figured that we would just move ourselves out to New Brunswick and go fishing, see if we can catch this. So I actually remember driving to Montreal because one of my co-founders, Ryan, was from Montreal. We get to his parents' house, and I remember his parents look at us and they go, where are you guys going? Like, are you going out to the bar? Are you in Montreal for the weekend? And we go, no, we're moving to New Brunswick to open a fishery. And his parents looked at us like, my God, they were both doctors, and they're like, what is my child doing right now? So we made it out there, and the first thing we figured out was that you actually had to have a license to fish these sturgeon, and the government had stopped issuing licenses 20 years ago. So there was only 5 people left in the entire province of New Brunswick that had a sturgeon fishing license. So I remember calling fisheries myself, and the first phone call, I got a woman on the phone, and I said, look, can I have the names of the folks with the sturgeon fishing licenses? And she said, absolutely not. That would be against all the privacy rules. And so I called back every day to different numbers until I finally got a woman who's like, oh, I think I know where to find that. And I was like, thank you. So she gave me the list of these 5 people, but she certainly didn't give me their phone numbers. So I distinctly remember my only job as a telemarketer was truly going through the phone book. I called every Elmer Smith in the province of New Brunswick. And I mean, this is like the weirdest telephone call you've ever got, right? This is like, hello, I'm looking for the man with the sturgeon fishing license. And everyone's like, the what? But I finally got the right guy. And his wife picked up the phone, and she was lovely, and I could tell that they were like probably a lot older, maybe in their 70s. And I got Omar on the phone, and I said, look, I'm looking to rent your license for the summer. And sturgeon are exceptionally valuable fish. Each fish was worth between $5,000 and $10,000 to us. And so I was willing to pay up to $5,000 a day to rent this license from him. So I'm gearing up for this big negotiation, and I go, Elmer, what do you want for this license? And he goes, sweetheart, and I hate when people call me sweetie, but I took it. He goes, how about $500 for you for the summer? And I said, Elmer, we have a deal. So off I went. Now we had a license, but Elmer was like in his 70s, and so he wasn't going to go fishing anymore for me. So I remember needing to find a fisherman that could go out and fish. And so I was like, this can't be this hard. We're in New Brunswick. And so I asked one of the ladies at the government if she knew anyone that was looking for work. And she goes, oh yeah, there's this guy named Ted. This is 2008. And so I was like, well, does Ted have a phone number or an email? And she goes, no, that's not how you find Ted. And I was like, okay. She's like, you go up the road, you go left at the red house, you go right at the greenhouse, and in that little cul-de-sac just by the bay, that's where Ted lives. So off we went, we drove to Ted's house. I distinctly remember being there. I remember knocking on that door myself and thinking I had the right house because there was fishing gear all over the yard, and knocking on the door, and there was no one home. So I sat back down, and we went back into Ryan's Toyota Camry, and we sat there. And it was like the July heat like this, and we waited for 8 hours for Ted to come home. And the only thing that's going through my head is like I have an engineering degree and I have an MBA, and like I'm literally stalking a fisherman. This is all it is. I'm just stalking a fisherman. So thank God that Ted came home. He was there. He was super excited when we got there. He said, of course, I'll go fishing for you guys. I'll catch the first fish tomorrow. But he goes, I have another problem. And this is the one that's just the most unbelievable. He goes, I don't have a boat. And I was like, what kind of fisherman has no boat? And he goes, but I have a buddy that has a boat that he'll sell to me. And the boat's on the other side of the bay. And it will take us 9 hours to drive the boat around the bay. But if you give me a 2 for a beer, I'll just drive it across the river. So I said, fine. I'll buy the boat. Every fish you catch, this is the very first financing deal I ever did in my life. Every fish you catch, I'll deduct part of the price of the boat. And we'll make you a little rent-to-own contract on our little fiberglass boat that we bought. So here I am, finally. I have the license, I have a fisherman, I have a boat. Things start to get going. We convinced the guy that we should relicense his facility. We had the nicest woman in the government, and she put all our approvals through, and off we went. And this was the scrappiest, grossest business in the world. I mean, I woke up at 5 a.m. I put on rubber boots that didn't come off for 14 hours. We went to go choose basically our catch of the day. We literally carried these 120-pound fish ourselves. We fully processed the fish, which is the polite way for saying we killed it and took all of its guts out and actually made caviar from scratch, which is one of the hardest things to do. It takes about 6 hours to actually do it correctly. And then after all of that, we would get on the phone and we would start calling restaurants that had never heard of us, being like, we're a brand new company you've never heard of. We have wild Canadian Atlantic sturgeon, and we caught it today, and we need to ship it to you by FedEx, which is in an hour before the deadline closes. And then we would have to make it to FedEx by 5. And so after days and days of doing this, we actually finally built a business that was making us some money. But now we were at the point of the fall, so we had done this throughout the summer. And it was September, and we sat there and we said, so now we're three 22-year-olds with a profitable, proven business model who need to raise $6 million in the greatest recession in the last 50 years. And it was the most pivotal moment of my career, when I learned that all the planning in the world, this perfect business plan, all of these people who told us we could do it, it was nothing compared to what I learned actually executing this business. And I'll never forget that, and it totally changed the way I operated as an entrepreneur. And so the recession got so bad, I ended up taking a job as the director of strategy at Sears. We got back together, the three of us, in a coffee shop on King and Yonge, and decided a year later that e-commerce was blowing up and we needed to launch a website. And this was when Daily Deals was just starting. And this time, instead of a giant, elaborate business plan, we had a business plan that was 3 pillars. Get ready for these, because they're really pathetic. The first part of the business plan is that we would outsource a website overseas to be built because we had no money to pay a Canadian developer. And we had $15,000 left in our caviar bank account. That was the fun that we had to go with. Second thing that we would do is we would launch at a conference. And the third thing that we would do is we would have a famous person tweet for us. That was our entire business plan. So what happens? Well, we get to the day of the conference, and we paid like $1,000 to exhibit at this conference, which at the time seemed like an enormous amount of money. And we call the developers, and they say, well, the website isn't ready. I was like, what do you mean the website isn't ready? Like, we're launching tomorrow. They go, well, the website isn't ready. And I was like, what is ready? And they're like, oh, like nothing. So we were like, okay. So we launched the trade show. I was not giving up my $1,000 booth. And I'll still remember to this day, we had 3 laptops set up. And we had internet browsers open. And on those internet browsers was a JPEG. So it was a picture of a website. It wasn't an actual website. It looked like a website with all the little links and all the little fonts. But it was a picture of a website. And we coded one button into that picture, and that was the buy button. And that button took you to a PayPal page where you could give us your credit card. And then we had the famous person tweet for us, and that did absolutely nothing. But you know what did happen? We ended up making $10,000 of sales at that very first trade show off a JPEG. And I would have never guessed that from there we would have become one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. Today, Bytopia and all of its affiliates, like we acquired the Shop.ca assets, which had raised $74 million. We bought Mighty Deals in the UK. We have 7 million subscribers today. I would have never guessed that would have come out of this pathetic little business plan. And we had no right to win. I mean, there was 18 competitors in the space, I think, when we started. Most of them had funding, and we didn't. It was just, we had no real competitive advantages when we started. We just kept putting one foot in front of the other, figuring out what customers wanted, figuring out how to hustle for bigger deals. And that, eventually made it all happen. And so I think then the third thing is then how do you take, I think the biggest problem we have today is that we don't talk enough about failure. We have now a culture where we want to say the word failure, but people don't really get up and say like how bad it was and how many things started. So let me be the first. I mean, after we had started Bytopia, we started a scheduling software company that I thought we could sell to our merchants that we dumped, close to $1 million into that we could never, ever make work. We started a beauty box company where we thought we could compete with Birchbox. We started a competitor to Seamless that totally didn't make it. And, everyone looked and they said, well, why, this is so bad. And I'm thinking, well, but it's not bad because what ended up happening is when we started that little beauty box competitor, we actually figured out that our customers that were Bytopia clients wanted deals on groceries. So that was kind of our first thing, is could we send samples to people's houses? We then built a printed home website and no one liked that. But it was that iterative process that led us to what SnapSaves became, which was eventually a mobile experience where you could go through any grocery store, retailer agnostic, take a photo of your receipt, and get cash on your phone at that moment without having to do anything at the retailer level. But we would have never figured that out. And we perpetuate this myth that ideas need to be big, that people need to have eureka moments, that you somehow, like, and it's everything. It's like the stock photography is my favorite, right? It's like the woman, and there's like a sea, and she's like meditating. She's like getting the big eureka moments. It's never happened in my life. I've never had a eureka moment. I've never had a moment. I've had lots of nights where I haven't slept, but that's because I thought we were going to die and have no money left. I've never had an idea that felt so big I couldn't not do it. I think that's what people tell in reverse. I think that I can word all of my stories, and all the founders can word their stories as like the moment they knew it was the biggest idea. But that's really bullshit, because there was no moment where you knew it was a big idea. It was an idea that you iterated yourself into time and time again. And then we forget how big ideas actually start really small. And my favorite example of this is Airbnb. So when Airbnb started, they didn't start off saying, we want to be the global competitor to Marriott, and we're going to book more hotel rooms per year than anyone else in the next 6 years. This is how they started. They said, sometimes people go to conferences. So this is like market size. People go to conferences. It's just business travelers. Then there's people that go to conferences. Then there's people that go to conferences where their hotel for the conference is sold out. And then there's an even smaller subsegment, let's make it really small, of people that go to conferences where the hotel is sold out, where you would be willing to stay on a stranger's air mattress. Like, that should be hilarious. Because that is the tiniest, I don't even know if that's a market. But they start up, and this is classic innovation, is you start off servicing a group of customers that no one really cares about, and you figure out what made that work, and then they kept iterating on that little idea. And their actual big idea was that it wasn't just people in Myrtle Beach or in Hawaii that were willing to rent out their homes to strangers, which was this old vacation rental space. It was actually that young people in cities would be willing to rent out their place to strangers for a very short period of time. But it didn't start like that. I mean, think about Uber. It didn't start like that either. Uber started because Travis didn't want to have to pick up the phone and interrupt his date to call a cab. He wanted to push a button and get a car. That is not a huge idea. That is not, the global behemoth we have today that invented the sharing economy. These ideas start so small, and we do ourselves such a disservice by telling each other that they need to be these giant ideas. And so when we looked at starting Clearbanc, if we would have done things with the old model, we would have said, well, let's go out, let's get a banking charter, let's figure out how to do that. And instead, we just moved a team of 7 people to a hacker house in San Francisco. We figured that we could start piecing together pieces of banking products. We would get a first customer. In our first 3 months, we got Uber as our first customer. We said, we'll finance all your drivers. And then we got 20,000 debit cards into the market within the first 3 months. But that would have never happened if I had taken my old approach of over-planning, overthinking. And it's really interesting because that business has moved as well. The big moment there is when we discovered it was less about the freelancer market and more about how new companies are starting today. And so our big thesis behind Clearbanc is that the companies that are starting today are processing payments online and they're acquiring customers online. And when you get those two data streams, that should actually be the most perfect underwriting data. And right now, believe it or not, at banks across Canada and America, if you are a small business and you are growing, they're going to say, oh, we'd love to give you credit. Fill out this form. Give us a business plan. We'll never read it. And give me your SIN number so I can check your credit, and then I'm going to offer you credit with a personal guarantee. So that's not small business lending. That's really personal lending that's called small business lending. And we think there is an enormous opportunity there to build. Anyway, so thank you so much for staying with me in this very, very hot tent right now. I think that those are some of the stories that I wanted to share with you.